Hello. Well, it's Saturday afternoon, it's 2 o'clock, and here we are again. Let us start with a prayer. It's Passover, it's the 27th of the 3rd, 2021. Let's have a prayer. God, you spake these words and said, I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Lord, have mercy upon our souls. Incline our hearts and keep this law written on our souls forever. We so often make graven images of things around us, Lord. Forgive us. And as we celebrate your Passover, which is just a meal, the actual celebration is the unleavened bread. And the unleavened bread is there for all who take part in it, Lord. That unleavened bread, let the leaven be taken out of our old lives and new lives. May we have unleavened bread, and may we do the will of God and follow your commandments, your statutes, and your law, so that it is a guide to us. For it was on the Passover that your Son passed the most incredible test, where he gave up his life so that the sins of the world can be saved, so that we could become grafted into the Israel that is going to be your bride when you come again. Thank you, Lord, for that. Thank you. Thank you for making us part of your life. And let us go from here and explain to the children what is it that we are actually celebrating. Lord, I have many sins, and I ask you to pardon my sins, but don't make this about me. Make it about Jesus, who died on the cross 2 days ago. Yes, okay, let's go. Amen. And the story goes like this, and it's actually quite a big story. It all started with a guy by the name of Joseph, who had a multicolored coat. His father loved him. Him and his younger brother called Benjamin. They were part of 12 brothers. 12. Not just 1 or 2, 12 brothers. And Joseph was thrown into a pit because he was arrogant, and the traffic that went past there, they gave him to some slave master, and he was sold in Egypt to a Potiphar. And then, of course, he succeeded. He was a very good worker. And he grew, and he brought his family to Egypt, and there were about 70 of them. Big family. And the 70 people became about 800 to 2 million people, 2.5, 3 million people, 4 million people. And 400 years later, there was a guy by the name of Moses born, and he lived in the palace. He's Jewish, and the king tried to kill him, and Moses lived in the palace. He was the daughter found him and loved him and kept him as almost like a pet. And he grew up to be, he knew how to write, he knew how to do arithmetic, he knew all those things. God was grooming him, and then he unfortunately made a mistake. And they sent him to the desert, where he went to the desert. And he lived and he learned everything about the desert. And then God spoke to him in a burning bush and said to him, Moses, I want you to go back to the Pharaoh and tell him I want my people to be set free. And Moses, very much like Jonah, didn't want to do this task at all. He made excuse after excuse after excuse, and it didn't work. Anyway, cut a long story short, Moses goes back to the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh accepts him, and he says, hello, how are you? And he says, what do you want? So Moses says, I want the people, the Jewish people, my people, to be set free. God sent me along here to tell you that you must please let my people go. Now you have to put yourself in Pharaoh's place as well. Pharaoh is sitting there and he's thinking, this man's asking me to let my workforce go. Not a good idea. So Pharaoh says no. And he hardened his heart and he says no. Well, God sends a whole lot of plagues. And one of them was frogs, and another one was flies, and the sea was turned into blood. All these things happened right up until Pharaoh said, no, I'm not letting it go. And then God says, I'm going to do one more. And he will let them go. And he said to Moses, I want you to do me and everybody that you want saved must do this. I am going to kill the eldest son, or the oldest sheep, the oldest everything, the first one that was born in the family is going to die. And God said, unless you do the next things, unless you take the blood and you put it on of a lamb that's 1 year old, and you put it on the threshold, the doorposts, and of course the lintel. So they did that, and the angel of death came, and when he saw the blood, he passed over the house, and he left that house alone, and he went on to go and see if he could actually get onto the fantastic doings of all the wonderful movement of the people. Now, they had eaten the night before. God had given them a meal called the Passover meal, which is lamb and all kinds of things. So he went on, and they actually moved from there onto a wonderful time through the everything was going perfectly for this. And I've got all kinds of guests here today, so it's wonderful to see everybody online and in the house as well. They outside the window, and so if you're hearing any noises outside, that's because there's a whole crowd there. They're listening as well. And where was I? And God said, you have your meal, and then you take the meal, and what you do after that is you have your staff ready. Staff is a long rod, and it's a cane that you've seen people walking with canes and that. Well, that's what they had, and they had the coats on and the sandals on, and they waited for the command that they must now leave. So, okay. What they did then is they commanded them that they must leave, and everybody, because Pharaoh said, okay, take the people out of here, because he couldn't take the plague that his son had died. And away they went. And they marched through the desert. Now 4 million people is a lot of people, so they were going very slowly, but they were going towards the route that they were going to take, and then Moses took them into the desert. And 3 days they travelled in the desert, and after 3 days of mourning is when you cry for the people that have passed away. The Israelis said, hey, where's our staff? We can't carry on working without anybody living here. And they started riding after them, and they were going as fast as they could to catch up to the Israelis, Israel. And Israel had walked a long way, and they came to a beach where they had to go across the Red Sea. And they were it was through the mountains and everything like that, a special way that God had told them to go. And they got to this Red Sea. And they never had any food. They had only unleavened bread that they were told to bake. And when they got there, the Egyptians were coming closer and closer. And God says to Moses, take your cane, your rod, touch the water. And he touched the water, and the water parted, opened up in front of him. And as people walked through, on each side of the water was stacked up, high. But on the floor, there was no water, it was just sand. So they walked across that to the other side of the river, the other side of the sea. And when they got there, the Egyptians were coming over the mountain, and they tried to come into this passage that God had opened up for Israel. And as the last Israeli walked over there, the water closed up, and not one of the Egyptians was saved. And today they're still underneath the Red Sea. There's wagon wheels and things that haven't been totally